Welcome to ADSW. I'm John Defterios, the former emerging markets editor, energy correspondent, and anchor for CNN International. I'm joined by Mike Dunleavy. He's the governor of Alaska. Governor, it's great to have you in the studio to digest what was discussed here in Abu Dhabi. I think it'd be great to start that the reputation, if you're an American, is that Alaska is a major oil producer. It will continue to be so. But you have pretty big master plans here for the entire energy value chain, which goes from gas to minerals, tidal, wind, carbon capture. Why are you all in on energy here?
Because it's Alaska. Alaska was brought into the Union in 1867 by William Seward, Secretary of State, because of its resource potential. And I say resource potential because it's everything. It's minerals, it's oil, it's gas, it's wind, it's solar. I'll give you an example. We have solar panels operating right now north of the Arctic Circle. And that helps some of our rural communities displace diesel, because diesel is very expensive. So what you end up doing is using the solar panels along with wind, tremendous wind resources in the Arctic too. I lived in a town called Kotzebue, and in the 90s we had big windmills producing electricity. But what that does is it displaces diesel, which is high cost in rural Alaska. In some places in rural Alaska, diesel will cost $10 a gallon, which is unaffordable. It stunts the economic growth of the area. So by putting these capital costs, these fixed capital costs, solar panels, wind, you're able to reduce the cost of energy tremendously. And in essence, your diesel then acts as a battery during the winter when you need more of it. So Alaska, super giant in terms of energy. We know that Texas is a giant in wind, solar, gas, as well as oil. Iowa is a giant in wind, but Alaska is a super giant in wind, a giant in solar. Massive tides in the Cook Inlet, second largest tides in the world for tidal power. We have 50 active volcanoes in Alaska for geothermal power. Our onshore wind and offshore wind, the list goes on. We have 43 million acres of trees underneath the state sovereign that could be used for biomass. Synthetic aviation fuel. We have the second busiest cargo airport in the United States, right at Ted Stevens, and it's the third busiest in the entire world. So you have international carriers coming there all the time. A lot of those international carriers are now asking for sustainable aviation fuel. You touched upon our carbon sequestration possibilities. Cook Inlet, right by Anchorage again, 50 gigatons of carbon can be stored there. On the North Slope, it's well over 150 gigatons of carbon. Massive capability. And our proximity to Asia is second to none. We are the Arctic state. We are the Western Pacific state. We are further west. We are so far west, we're 1,000 miles closer to Australia than California. Most people don't realize that. No. How can an Arctic state be close to Australia? Because we're so far west.
What does it mean for attracting investment into Alaska, in your view, particularly with the new administration or Trump 2.0? He talks about drill, baby, drill, but he sees the value of strategic minerals for the energy transition. So for solar PV, wind, battery storage, but how do you position it for investment?
Well, and I will say that the president also sees it as a national security issue. You don't want to offshore your critical minerals because you see what's happening when you offshore them. If certain countries don't want to release those minerals to others, such as the United States, you have a problem. But oil and gas giant is Alaska, but I see President Trump unleashing all kinds of opportunity. And what I mean by that is I think adding more lease options and availability for Alaska, being able to permit roads going across certain federal lands, BLM lands, to get to critical mining areas, making it a priority to mine in America,
And quickly, I think, is the big question.
I think the first day or two in office, you're going to see a flurry of executive orders that will touch upon many of these topics.
No, not in my backyard. You know, everybody has this fear of having mining facilities in the U.S. territories, but you think you can get past it?
I will say, to some extent, it's going to turn to, yes, we want it in my backyard. We want it here in America. We want to be able to do it here so we can take care of the environment by watching what's happening here better than we can overseas. We get the jobs here, we get the revenue here, we get the national security here, and you get the minerals right here in America where you're able to hopefully process them and turn them into value-added products like you had mentioned earlier.
Good. LNG, you think there's capability here, and we have to talk about the energy transition and how that's viewed in the United States and under a Trump administration. But LNG connectivity, where would be the offtake for LNG from Alaska?
Our Asian allies would be a big recipient of gas. Alaska pioneered LNG export for the Western Hemisphere in 1969. We were the state that had the first LNG export plant in the country. For 50 years, we sent LNG to our Japanese allies. The gas field was blown down in 2017. Those facilities are pickled right now. But the gas that would come from the slope would go to our Asian allies, but the gas would also be used for AI and supercomputing. Alaska is a perfect place to put a supercomputing or an AI outfit. Why? Cool weather, 3 times the fresh water of any other state in the country, large tracts of contiguous land, and enormous amounts of gas for power.
But do you think it's often overlooked when we talk about AI, not here at ADSW or some of the other strategic energy events that take place in the Middle East, they understand it. But do Americans really comprehend the fact that energy demand is expected to surge with the adoption of AI, and where does Alaska fit in?
Yeah, I think especially folks in the lower 48 are seeing that now with increased utility costs and pressures on residential electricity. Alaska is a different situation. We only have 740,000 people in the state of Alaska. 500,000 of them are on a what we call the rail belt, the major corridor where most of the people live. We would actually benefit from AI and data centers because the draw on gas to convert that to electricity would lower the cost of energy for Alaskans on the rail belt because we would get cheap and abundant gas to do that. So there's a bit of an inverse in Alaska. Other places in America, there may be competition, as I said, with utility rates, but in Alaska, by having anchor customers like data farms, we believe that we will actually be able to lower the cost of our energy for folks on the rail belt.
It's very interesting. Here we talk about the energy transition. I've lived in Abu Dhabi for 10 years, and they're supporting both development of oil and gas, but also Masdar, one of the major investors in renewables. But how do you define the energy transition in the U.S. parlance, if you will, the language?
It's a great question. I think it's the big question for this year. If transition means you're going to go from one source of production of energy and leave that source and adopt new sources such as the technologies in solar, wind, green energies, I think that concept is, to be honest with you, is gone. I think it disappeared in the last several months, especially when in March it was announced by NVIDIA that the Blackwell chip would come online. That chip is going to use at least 3 times the amount of energy current chips use. Well, when you look at you look at where this is going to go, how can you transition? We're already behind the 8 ball. We need additional energy. We need as much gas as possible. We need as much solar and wind, of course, but we also need geothermal, tidal. And I wouldn't be surprised, I know there might be some gasps, but I wouldn't be surprised if you see coal plants permitted in the United States over the next several years, because to meet that demand and to be able to ensure that utility rates don't skyrocket as well, it's all hands on deck for energy. So I don't think it's transition anymore, I think it's additionality.
How do you square trying to maintain climate policies at the same time where there's so much demand for energy?
So gas as an underlier, gas as a reliable fuel source is by many definitions low carbon. And I'll just talk about Alaska real quick. Our gas is going to be one of the lowest carbon projects in the world because we know the content of the gas now on the slope, and we can sequester that gas through a conditioning plant, a stripping plant. So the gas that would come down our pipeline would be carbon free, would then be sent to our Asian allies and used in the state of Alaska. I would say that we have opportunities, I think, to sequester carbon. We have opportunities, I think, to work on technologies on carbon. But the question is, do we have time to afford not to embrace all energy production, all energy sources? Because if we don't, then we're going to retard the growth of AI expansion here in the United States.
Great to have you in the studio, and thanks for your analysis on the landscape for Alaska in the geopolitical and geoeconomic sense.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.